Welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast. My name is Dan Hamilton. I am excited today to be sitting down with Tony Cucolo. Tony, thank you for being here to give us a little bit of background on your military career as well as Associate Vice Chancellor at the University of Texas. Before we dive into what I think is going to be a great conversation about leadership, about serving in your community after you leave the military, give us a little bit of background on your military career and then where you currently stand in the faculty at the University of Texas.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here and really appreciate all you're doing to bring veterans' voices to the general public and also to their peers. I am honored to serve at the University of Texas System Administration, so that's the goodness of that is, well, whenever I say that to somebody, they say, hey, do we have a team this year? And I say, well, which team do you mean? We got the Longhorns, we got the Miners, we got the Roadrunners. So I'm blessed to work at the, for you military folks, the core headquarters, CORPS, of 14 fantastic institutions, 8 universities, 6 medical centers in the headquarters building here downtown Austin. I came here by way of the previous Chancellor Bill McRaven, Navy Admiral, Navy SEAL, and he and I had served together several times, and he knew me as a passionate leader developer, and he had a vision for leader development at the University of Texas System. And what I brought was my military experience, which I consider myself a soldier for life, 35 years in the United States Army. Transitioned out, I will not say the retirement word. I transitioned out and too much gas left in the tank. In September of 2014, September 1st, 2014. Kicked around a little bit. Set up a limited liability company, but then the Chancellor called me in January 15, and I joined the UT System Administration team in April of 15, and been here since. But my military career was 35 years of mostly infantry, and so I was a United States Army infantry officer, did all the usual things infantry officers do. Was blessed to lead a battalion into the Balkans when we crossed the Sava River in New Year's Eve of 1995, and spent 11 months there as part of the first NATO implementation force after the Dayton Peace Accord. I was blessed to command a brigade combat team, Fort Benning, Georgia, and then I was Assistant Division Commander, 10th Mountain Division, went to Afghanistan with them. And then was Chief of Army Public Affairs, which brought me incredible window view on strategic leadership in Washington, D.C.
That's a much different playing field, if you will, from
absolutely
conflict zone to in the Pentagon.
You got it. And I'll tell you what, I would say that I've had an incredibly diverse portfolio as a general. So I was a general officer for 11 years. And I mean everything from not the usual, but the lucky,
sure.
which would be Deputy Commanding General, 10th Mountain, Afghanistan. I had the honor to command 3rd Infantry Division.
Yep.
And took them to Iraq. 09. I was the commander from 08 to 11. Took them to Iraq 09-10. And then I was commandant of the Army War College. So it was wonderfully diverse. But in the middle there, oh my goodness, I did operational analysis that took me to Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
And other natural disasters, and then also an operational analysis of Iraq and Afghanistan, declassified the Iraqi Perspectives Project of studying Saddam's regime.
Did you ever feel during that time when you were being either tasked with a different mission that you hadn't had necessarily direct experience with, did you ever feel not unqualified, but like, hey, this is going to be a totally new experience with
Absolutely.
me. How much is what I've done going to actually prepare me for dealing with Hurricane Katrina or working in public affairs?
Absolutely. No, every time. Okay.
Yeah,
Matter
so
of fact,
you felt
the comfort zone was 10th Mountain Division and 3rd Infantry Division. Everything else was, oh my gosh, what is this? But I got to level with you. Well, I mean, right, the operational analysis for 2 years, 04 to 06, threw me into different venues over and over and over again, and then spending 6 weeks on the Gulf Coast with the national response plan that was in transition, significant transition, and all the players, FEMA, Red Cross, local, and so on. But then the key one was being locked in a basement at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, the NORTHCOM headquarters, with all the signers of the national response plan and a blank whiteboard and saying, okay, what happened at Katrina?
Wow.
And coming up with what happened, why did it happen, and how do we make it better? The work with all those folks actually turned into the president's lessons learned on Katrina. But just the learning, I didn't know the FEMA, all the FEMA areas. Anyway, and then so public affairs was another one. And by the way, I volunteered to be chief of public affairs.
Wow, that's it's an interesting volunteer position, especially if you felt like your home is in 10th Mountain Division. Right?
Right. My home, absolutely. I felt that hard in infantryman, but I got to level with you. The Secretary of the Army guy at the time, named Fran Harvey, interviewed myself and a wonderful peer of mine named Bob Caslin for 2 jobs. So 2 brigadier generals going into the interview at separate times, and the 2 jobs were commandant at West Point or chief of public affairs. And Bob, he's senior to me, he goes in first, comes out. I said, Bob, what'd you tell him? And he said, I told him you'd make a great chief of public affairs. And so,
so he volunteered you maybe a little bit.
But I walked in, and Fran Harvey was a wonderful Secretary of the Army. I looked at him, and he had this pained look on his face, and I said, hey, sir, let me help you out. I want to be your chief of public affairs. And the reason I wanted to be the chief of public affairs was I was so frustrated with the way the Army told its story. And I wanted at it.
Was there a specific narrative that you wanted to change?
I wanted to change the way we told it. I thought the narrative was outstanding.
Right.
It was just we were not. The McCann-Erickson 1912 motto, they're an advertising agency, is truth well told.
Right.
And when you're a public entity like the United States Army, you must tell the truth. You can't spin, you can't market.
You have to deliver information the way that it is.
Right. But I thought we could be a little more creative with it. So I took a shot at that. Anyway, then another job that was totally out of my, and I guess when you were asking the question, the words that came to my mind were professionally apprehensive. So I didn't think I was.
So it wasn't fear, it wasn't concern, it wasn't.
It was, I knew I needed to learn something. I needed to go in, open my ears, up the intellectual curiosity level.
Yep.
And study and get to know and listen to experts. So and another one was I was for a year I was in charge of the Army equipment budget.
Let me ask you this, because you talked about when you were describing your career that after 35 years, that you still had gas left in the tank.
I'm telling you.
Why did you? Was it mentally? Was it physically? Was it still when you got up in the morning that you still enjoyed leading soldiers on the day-to-day basis, regardless if it was at the Army War College, regardless if it was in Iraq, or you still had the same desire to do what you did?
Absolutely. And if there's anything, somebody asked me the other day, hey, that must be really different working at UT System. I said, let me tell you what, I'm in a public entity,
right,
which the service is. I am beholden to a legislature.
Yeah.
Just the Texas State Legislature.
Right.
I must respond to political appointees like the Assistant Secretaries of the Army or the Secretary of the Army. This time they're called the Board of Regents, appointed by the governor. I am subject to a urinalysis.
There you go. I know. Look at all this is
financial disclosure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but if I miss anything, I miss soldiers, and I'll tell you who I miss the most. I miss NCOs the most. But anyway, I do miss soldiers a great deal. So the gas in the tank thing is, you just don't go cold turkey from a profession.
Did you feel like you did that?
Yeah.
Do you feel like most soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines do?
Yes. There's the camaraderie, the sense of belonging.
You can't find anywhere else.
I believe you can,
okay,
but you might actually have to lead and develop it yourself in your new environment.
And that's one of the most difficult things, because the military provides the environment. You have to adapt to it.
The structure,
outside of it,
the
you have
firewalls,
to develop it. Right.
Absolutely.
But Before we get too far into the community, I want to come back to talking about what veterans can do to create community, what they can do to continue to leave and continue to serve, and find those, in the Marine Corps, we call it esprit de corps.
Right.
But I want to talk a little bit more about your experience in the Army, and specifically, what did war teach you about leadership? You spent a lot of time training for war, and you spent a lot of time, whether it was in Bosnia or Iraq or Afghanistan. What can you tell us about your lessons from leadership in war?
Yeah. The first one is not a leadership lesson, but it's the one that I must say out loud first. Gratitude. Gratitude for the little things and gratitude for the big things. I'll explain just a second. But war reinforced my sense of gratitude. And the number one is relationships and how brief life is. And all you have to do is sit in one memorial service in theater. You know, I mean, the ramp ceremony's been had. Mm-hmm. The remains are headed to Dover, and now you are doing closure with the unit. And the closure with the unit, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
But for listeners, usually, okay, the Army way, at least in my outfit, we'd have the chaplain be the MC, so to speak. Battalion commander might get up, the company commander would get up, platoon leader would get up, or the platoon sergeant. But you'd always have a peer be the last one to speak, a buddy.
Maybe a junior enlisted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Staff NCO as somebody.
And so
who's a peer.
you're sitting there in this superheated corrugated aluminum shell of a building with bullet holes through it, and in front of you is the upturned rifle with a set of dog tags on it and a helmet and boots. And then what we would put is things that reminded us of the fallen.
Right.
If he was a Florida State fan, there'd be an FSU hat, there'd be, his favorite whatever.
I was going to say maybe something about music or something.
Absolutely,
I can find,
No, you got it. I'm the matter of fact, funny you say that, because the memorial service I'm remembering right now, this guy was a huge country music fan, and somebody had put a 12-string guitar there, right next to the rifle. But and so you're sitting there, and to listen to a 19 or a 20-year-old talk about life and death in front of a couple of hundred people, including a general.
Right.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And hearing the personal stories of the fallen. They're alive for you, and the memory stays alive with you. And it makes you thankful that you knew them, and it makes you thankful for what you have.
So if what you learned was gratitude, then how did you feel like you applied that as a leader?
Yeah. So
afterwards, or
right.
In your current role?
Well, so then I just wanted to mention gratitude first, but wartime leadership is it taught me empathy on steroids, meaning I could not make decisions without thinking first, what is happening at the level of execution? And I always knew that, from lieutenant days up, but it's different when tsunami waves of data are washing over you. There's a push for decisions at a senior level. You've got a Predator feed or some other UAV, unmanned aerial system feed coming at you, and you're thinking things are a certain way on the ground, but maybe they're not.
Different.
And you must transport yourself to the tip of the spear as you make decisions. And that might mean taking strategic patience. It might mean slowing things down. It might mean speeding things up. But and then afterwards, after an operation, not just going on to the next, but thinking, what now are these people dealing with?
Do you think you got better at putting gratitude and empathy into your leadership as time went on?
Absolutely, without question. The empathy is automatic, and the way it manifests itself, even now, is I guess an easy empathy test is oversimplifying it. But if you want to practice empathy, listen first, repeat back, brief back, and then act on what you heard some way, shape, or form. But the most important thing is to listen and then say back, now let me get this straight. What I heard you say was, am I getting this right? Is this what you're feeling?
Confirming what you've heard and making sure you heard it.
Confirm is a better word.
Right.
Listen, confirm, and then act in some way, shape, or form. So that was an element of practice. And then understanding that you show empathy in your words. So if I stood in front of an audience of any size, if I talked to any group or even an individual, I opened up with words that told them I was thinking of them.
Do you think that when you've learned these lessons, now that you're in an academic institution here in Texas, are the students on this campus or the veterans on this campus, are they able to pick up those lessons from you? Do you feel like they're listening to those lessons? How do you feel like it's been received, the lessons of war now, here, current day in Texas?
I can tell you across, in varying degrees, across 14 institutions, I spent most of my time working with faculty, staff, and administrators, and they get it.
Right.
It's resonating without question. I've also worked with student leaders, so I haven't had at too many general classes, but I have had at student government groups, the Assembly of Greek organizations, and so on, and they get it. It's just, it's a hard thing to do when you're young.
What would you say to a veteran who comes away from war with the lesson of bitterness or of grief, and maybe pulled experiences or memories that are contrary to what you said? What would you be your message to them to maybe try to pull them out of some of that bitterness or resentment that they still may hold?
Yeah, that's really hard. That's really hard. I mean, 2003, I'll level with you, 2004 specifically, I didn't believe I had anger management issues. I did. 2011, I didn't pay attention to the fact I wasn't sleeping. So my response to your question is, you have to admit first you got something going on. It doesn't. I was in denial.
Because it kind of sneaks up on you, right?
It sneaks up on you, and you think two things. One, first of all, you don't think there's anything wrong, even when other people tell you.
And if it hurts, you're like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'll
I'm
keep
fine,
going,
man.
right?
I mean,
keep
I
going,
play
yeah.
Ranger Candy, throw that down with some water,
Right.
Take a knee, draw water, move out, draw. I mean, all that, absolutely. So one is look in the mirror and tell yourself, okay, maybe I don't believe it, something's going on. I'm gonna check this out, and then there's nothing better than a peer to go to first. I mean, I had a wonderful chaplain try with me. I did the counseling thing, but
you had peers around you
It
that
took
you
a
trusted.
peer that I trusted, one peer in particular who I trusted, who said, no, hey, listen, let me give you examples on what I see. And I'm like, yeah, but every time I said, yeah, but, he countered and helped me see myself better. And you gotta drop the shell and seek help. So it's admit and seek help, and I'd suggest a peer.
So you were able to go from kind of bitterness or anger to learning the lessons of gratitude and empathy. Did at any point, did both of those exist at the same time? And at what point did you think that the gratitude and empathy became an overarching theme for leadership for you?
Yeah, there was a point. It was anger was comforting. You know,
because it was normal.
Well, it was. There was a really good reason for me to be angry.
Right, right, yeah. Oh,
okay.
I understand. Yeah. There's a purpose for it, though, in the military.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's like you
for
don't understand.
Yeah.
You don't you understand how good you have it here?
Right.
I can't believe you. Anyway, so, what I found was, after talking to a peer, do you ever feel ashamed when you don't do PT?
Yeah.
You know, doesn't it bother you?
Yeah, like you gave up something you should be working on.
Yeah, I'm a slug.
Yeah.
You know, or
I have to get back out there.
I got to get out there, right?
Yeah.
So, well, that's what happened to me. It was like, I need to feel grateful.
Interesting.
For everything I have, and it was the veteran. When I said gratitude for little things like reliable indoor plumbing.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
Okay. Electricity,
clean water, AC,
bottled water if only if you want it.
Yep.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
mean, stuff like that. That was the little things. But I found myself ignoring the fact that I had come from a place where it was rule by law instead of rule of law. And I came from feeling so good about a 92% turnout in the national elections of 2010 in the province of Kirkuk, to coming back and looking at a 20% turnout in a primary in the United States,
right.
and wanting to do whatever I could to remind, without being angry about it, remind my fellow Americans about how good they have it. So back to the PT thing.
Yeah.
I said I was ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
For becoming what I had become. And the military discipline of I got to go out and do PT because, I got to stay hard, I got to do it right. It became the emotional PT to come out of where I was.
Let me ask you this. During your service, you oversaw a great amount of diverse teams, especially when you were in Iraq. You were dealing with multiple coalitions of either ethnic or political opposition, and to the point, obviously, in theater where it is now violent, and there is potential for zero reconciliation. So, if you can, for the listening audience, are you able to describe some of, or maybe a way that you can build a diverse team or manage a diverse team, or even how you go into approach a situation with two parties or three parties that don't get along, but the manager or a junior leader still has to try to manage that group of people for the best outcome?
Right, absolutely. And overseas, I got chapter and verse. In Bosnia it was Muslim, Croat, and Serb that I had to bring together. First the military, and then the civilians. And then in Iraq, in particular, in Afghanistan, I was in charge of a tripartite commission, which means it was U.S., Afghan, and Pakistan, and I was in charge of two areas: border disputes and information sharing.
So you have a little bit of background in.
Holy cow! Yeah. And then in Iraq, I had it was in the 7 provinces north of Baghdad. That's the Kurd-Arab fault line. Mm-hmm. So I had Sunni Arabs, I had Shia Arabs, and then I had the Kurds. And I was in charge of, it was a wonderful idea, which should have stayed in there if this operation is called the Combined Security Mechanism, 26 checkpoints along the Kurd-Arab fault line from Syria to Iran, across the northern
all the way
part,
across the
all
country.
The way across. And at each checkpoint, there was a U.S. platoon, a Peshmerga platoon, Kurdish, and an Iraqi army platoon.
So that's 3 pretty volatile groups there.
So a mixed company of 3 different entities living together. We're talking chow, music, patrol, checkpoint. I mean, the whole thing.
24/7, 365.
24/7, 365. But the way now you can't do this. You can't do this in a corporate setting.
Right.
But the way we were successful with that, I'll just talk about that one in particular, was we brought together the force. We brought together the platoons, the companies that would make up this force. We gave them a new identity. They still wore their uniforms, but we gave them an identity. We called them the Golden Lions. We gave them an ethos. We actually came up with an ethos statement and a set of values, and a reward and a reward and punishment system for them.
For those units that are on the ground at the checkpoints.
And then the key was 4 to 6 weeks. I trained in 3 different areas, but 4 to 6 weeks of training together. So walk into the GP medium, the tent, with the cots, and there you all were. So you slept, you walked in, the first day they arrived, including the Americans, empty your bags. You don't need that, you don't need that.
Everyone's going through
the same thing. So there was a crucible, a socialization, a norming, with a new identity, and when they finished training, they got a brassard with a golden lion on it, and so they had, and then they went on patrol together, and
so it was key for you to create that identity, that regardless of where you came from, or who you're serving with, now the mission is going to be. Now you represent the Golden Lion. Now you represent these checkpoints.
You've got a standard for this organization and your families, because the families were a big deal, obviously, for those two cultures. But back to corporate America, perhaps, and I mean, even a closed society of the Army War College, I had tribes. Okay, I had tribes of
differing interests,
also different age groups. Anyway, so what I did there was I walked into a situation where it was a little bit, the tribes were entrenched. Here's a tip for any veteran working this, trying to build a diverse team with different groups. Talk to each one individually first. Find out what's important to them, each group individually.
You know what I think is key to that too? I apologize for interrupting you real quick. But I think it's important to point out that I'm almost maybe making an assumption here that did you have to block out what you thought about those groups prior to going to talk to them? Like you had to have some preconceived notions, regardless if it's in a boardroom or if it's in the sands of Iraq.
Absolutely.
You had to get rid of those before you met with them?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how much I studied. The Kurds were new to me. Sunni and Shia, I knew. I tried to understand.
Yeah.
Kurds were new. I studied the Kurds in great depth. And then I arrived and I found out, just like in the United States of America, in Sinjar Mountain, Mountain is different than Mosul. Mosul's different from the Erbil. Erbil's different from Kirkuk. Now, there's similarities, but you have to drop the baggage. You have to drop any known or subconscious bias and just listen. And that's, again, empathy. And you're applying empathy when you're listening to your diverse groups at work, in your company, your corporation, whatever. And then, and only then, after you understand them and listen, confirm, and come up with what you think might act, then you bring them together. And when you bring them together to build this diverse team, you use words, you tone, delivery. This is in emails, this is in text, this is in spoken word, with empathy, and you understand. And the last thing I'll say about it is, two really quick things.
Yeah.
I found this, there's a little exercise you can do as a group called a competing values, University of Michigan thing. Competing values, I'll call it a drill.
Okay.
But what it does is it shows the group. Oh, of course the CFO thinks that way because she has to. That's the nature of her job. I must not just assume she is making a decision a certain way because of some bias I have.
Right.
Okay, so this competing values drill is a great one to do. I've done it with groups, and it helps a group. I did it with a law enforcement group the other day, and they're like, okay. So the administration is not the dark side. I understand that, and we're one team with different skill sets and competing values.
Because you're trying to push out some of those biases they have, and you're also trying to expose the bias in the individual that you're trying to lead.
Exactly.
What would you say has been their most rewarding leadership lesson that you've learned? And I know you yourself consider yourself a student of leadership.
Yeah.
So I'm going to break this up into two questions. What do you think is the most rewarding aspect of leadership to this point? And then would you follow up within where do you see the most growth potential for yourself to lead?
Yeah. Okay. the most rewarding has been to improve an organization. But when I say improve an organization, these are not my words, I stole them. Lift as I climb. So if I'm leading an organization, I'm looking, and this is the mark of a profession. The steward of a profession wants the profession to continue, so they look to the youth in the profession and say, wow, you are good and you are good. Let me make sure you are equipped to go to the next level. I'm going to spend time on you. And so the best organizations invest in their own people. So the most rewarding leadership thing is, I would say, is lifting as I climb. The definition of leadership that I subscribe to includes the last phrase of, and improve the organization, which means the leader is not important.
What do you mean
as
by
an
that?
individual? If I'm leading an organization, I am not important. The organization is.
The mission is.
The organization is.
Okay.
But the organization exists to perform a mission. So yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
if you operate that way, you make decisions for the good of the organization and the people in it, not to pad your resume, not to just. We were interviewing somebody a few months back, and that person said in the interview, somebody asked them, "Why do you want this job?" And that person said, "It's the obvious next stepping stone in my career." And everybody nodded, took notes, they left. The interviewee left, and they went around the room. Well, sounded great. It got to me, and I said, I don't want to work with them. No way. Because when it comes down to it, between that person and the organization, that person is going to pick themselves. Okay, so maybe I'm being harsh, but
no, but that's a great a lesson that you've learned to put as a leader, that you have to put the organization ahead of the individual's interests.
Yeah, and you know the deal. You, Dan, you know yourself. Leaders eat last. I mean,
Right.
I know Simon Sinek put that in title in his book, but we've been listening to that in our entire military career.
Yes, yeah.
You're last in line for the good deal, and you're first in line for the bad deal when you're a leader. And I think from millennials to iGen, I think people appreciate that.
So you really enjoy seeing an organization improve over the time that you've been there.
Right.
And one area of growth that you would like to see in yourself, or maybe something that you've been kind of interested in, or an idea or something about leadership that's caught your attention, maybe let's say since your time of leaving the military.
Yeah, I absolutely. There's something about the oath we all took to support and defend a body of ideals, and that was so comforting, because I don't want to see the flag burned, but I'm not defending a flag. I'm defending a body of ideals. Take a knee, don't take a knee. I got it. I'm defending a body of ideals. That was beautiful. And so, in the last couple of years, now look, I'm being totally nonpartisan here, but you asked me about personal growth.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, that sense of defend the Constitution of the United States has been eaten at me as I watch foundational elements or keepers of the Constitution, institutions that sustain the Constitution, start to fade. The ethical fading in particular, but that's not important anymore. Or the media, dismiss the media.
Right.
They're not. I mean, no.
Yeah.
I've been places where there's one media and it's controlled. That's not good.
Yeah.
Doesn't end well. Anyway, or making laws that specifically target a group of people.
Yeah.
That doesn't work either.
Right.
Anyway, so the area of personal growth is, I'm motivated to defend the Constitution again, and I don't know how yet, but
you want to continue to be in that arena.
I want to be in that arena at the national level. So anyway, I don't know what that is yet.
a lesson from your transition to the civilian world after retirement. We talk a lot about lessons here, but the reason that I try to point this out and bring it up within the conversations that we have is here at the Voices of Veterans podcast, is we want to be able to allow our guests to give lessons to active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. So when they come out, they already have their toolkit. They're able to approach the civilian world in transition with the lessons that you have already learned. So what would you say?
Scar tissue.
Scar tissue, yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, you know what? We've gone through it. We have the scars to show. What would be your advice for maybe a junior soldier going to leave the military about the civilian world?
Yeah. There's a dual responsibility in transition. And I think when I used to walk into the rapid equipping facility before a deployment and get new boots, I was handed new Oakleys. You remember?
Yep.
Okay. I got into a world, and even when I took my outfit to train, it was, okay, this is what the enemy's doing, so we're going to practice these things. Somebody else gave that to me. This is at least during the heyday of the mid-2000s. And I could see that my younger leaders got into the mode of, okay, tell me what to do.
Before taking initiative or before? Right.
Or I am reporting to you now for work. Tell me what to do.
So it's a reactionary mindset to some degree that you would say is not as transferable to the civilian world.
Right, and I don't want to overstate it, but but gang, if you're listening, it's in you somewhere, because there was structure. There was a personnel office to go to, and there was somebody there who would say, "Yeah, fill out this 41A.
This is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do after that.
That's what you got to do, and if you don't, you got to." Anyway, none of that is there. And so the dual responsibility is, you must ask. You must not feel disrespected. You must not feel slighted. Thank you. If that doesn't exist.
Doesn't have anything to do with you.
Doesn't have anything to do with you.
It's just the way the civilian world is.
No, it's not like you're treating me this way because I'm a veteran.
Right.
No. We're treating you this way because we are a soup sandwich in HR.
Yeah.
And it's just
you
the way this out. You got to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I'm not picking on HR, but anyway. So, but the other responsibility is to the company, and the company should have. I mean, wherever you're going, look for a peer there to help guide you. The company should have some kind of sponsorship. But I want to lay on the veterans' responsibility as a heavy.
Yes.
And then the other advice I would give is when somebody tells you you need to change, don't. Do not change. And what I mean is you are equipped. You have a bias for action.
Yeah.
That does not exist in large quantities out here. You are disciplined. You have a work ethic that will set you apart from others. Not all, but from others. These are things that should not change. You have a set of values that you can share by example to others. And so, bragging is a character flaw.
Yeah.
So when you go in there, be yourself as a veteran, as a former service member. Do not change those things that were imbued in you that made you a great soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, or Coast Guard.
I think one of the things that veterans here in Texas may be struggling with, or veterans that I've met with or that you've talked to, is trying to figure out what attributes to be forward with, and then what attributes they have to kind of leave in the service. And I think maybe one way that veterans can approach that dilemma of, hey, I can't act or talk or say certain things like I used to back in my unit because I'm in a civilian or corporate or private environment. But I think one of the best ways that veterans can identify the culture of organizations is like what you said, is trying to find a mentor or trying to find somebody who's done it, and kind of emulate the person in the same way that if you're an E3, you emulate the the E5, the sergeant, and it's a very similar, I think, one-for-one comparison. And it's hard for veterans to make the one-for-one comparison because the civilian world is so individualistic, and because the military world is so group-oriented.
Totally team-oriented, right.
I'll come back to something we talked about at the very beginning of the conversation, was about the need for veterans to find a group and the desire for veterans to find that esprit de corps, or find something that's larger than themselves. If veterans don't feel or are maybe suffering in an individualistic element or surroundings or whatever, what would be your message to them to go try to find a group that gives them meaning, that gives them purpose, and where they can surround themselves with people who are on a like-minded mission?
Absolutely. No, it doesn't matter what group, and it doesn't matter how many different groups you try, but go somewhere. Yeah. I mean, if it's coffee with Team Red, White, and Blue at Starbucks on every Wednesday morning or whatever, or if it's maybe the VFW or the American Legion is pushing for a younger group, and you find that niche there, and so on. Go sample different groups. Take the time to do it. You will student veterans are among the best. I mean, you'll find the most diverse group, including age-wise, come together, and suddenly the lexicon, the wording, the phrases, everybody's, and I can talk the way I used to talk with them.
Yeah.
You find they understand what I'm saying. They understand me, and it's an amazing thing. The rucksack of anxiety kind of falls off your shoulders, and you don't know it.
I found that same thing when I was in the Student Veterans Association. I felt like I was a fish back in water.
Right, and it's not permanent. I mean, you walk in, you come out, but there's something happens to you. Mm-hmm. It's like I miss risk. Yeah. I miss adrenaline rushes. I ride a motorcycle.
Yeah. It's controlled.
It's controlled.
It's controlled in this way. It's controlled chaos is what I used to say.
But I get off the bike and I feel better. Yeah. I go to a veterans group, I come out, I feel better. And so I'd recommend that they go and find something. And then the other thing is, do not hesitate. This is a big one that we kind of leave on the table. You are educated, trained, and equipped to create teams. And there is a large segment of our society out there that desires a sense of belonging. And I don't mean fitting in. Fitting in is not belonging. Belonging is, I identify with this group. No matter what I look like, no matter where it came from, I'm comfortable with this group of people. Veterans should form groups. It doesn't have to be veteran only. I mean, if I'm working at Ernst & Young, and I'm in Cucolo Valley with 60 people, maybe I go, hey, what's everybody's interest? We formed this group, and
I actually think that's tremendous advice, because I found the same thing. I found that when I engaged with the Student Veterans Association group on my campus, that it put me back into community with people who had similar interests, and two, it allowed me to lead in a way that I had not felt since being in the military. And I think it's like you said, that veterans can apply that being in a group or taking the initiative to lead a group in whatever industry they're in, regardless of what their office looks like, that is an opportunity for Texas veterans wherever they are to take that initiative.
Absolutely, and they'll make their organization better. They'll get chops leading again, and they'll get their leadership skills down even better. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, that's a great place to end it. On behalf of the Veterans Land Board and Commissioner George P. Bush, Tony, I just want to thank you for your leadership, your dedication to our country, as well as imparting some great lessons about transition, about leadership, and then about what veterans can do here in Texas to really continue to be engaged with their society. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Dan. It's an honor to be with you.
Thanks.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.